You're listening to Best Forevers, a podcast for kindred spirits, a podcast that encourages you to love more on your friends and to further consider the issues that plague friendships. I'm Alysa Lucas, and as we get closer to the 3-year podiversary of Best Forevers, I'm thinking more and more about the small and little ways that we celebrate friendships. So let me read to you a little statement and see what you think. All right, little bunny foo-foo, watch your six because that brand is on you like a whoopee with making instant mashed potatoes on their mind. Now, how many of you were like, that does seem like English, and I know what watch your six is because I'm familiar with the military, but otherwise, you're not really sure what a whoopee and mashed potatoes have to do and who or what a brand is, and who is this little bunny foo-foo? And what I have to say is that there are a few people out there who might be listening that could understand what I have to say right now. That sentence can only be understood by these few people, and that's because I use what's called personal idioms. And it's one of my favorite topics of all time to talk about when I teach interpersonal communication and talk about relationships, romantic, friendly, family, or otherwise. So certainly the research here that I'm going to share with you today is focused in romantic, but also applies to friendship. And that is the work of personal idioms. So let's get into it. That is the goal today. Let's talk about what personal idioms are, how we use them in our friendships, and how we can further use them in our friendships. Because again, we all need friends. I'm sure many of us are like, need some friends now. Maybe we need to reconnect with some friends, and personal idioms might be the way to do it. So I was looking online and came across an article. Well, it's a book chapter, but it's done by Sandra Metz and Sylvia McCookie. And I've met Sandra Metz, and she's pretty awesome and does some pretty cool research in the communication field. And she has a chapter about personal idioms, and she and her co-author say, quote, "The point of personal idioms is that they allow persons in close relationships to communicate with private language that simultaneously unites them while excluding outsiders." And what I love about this is that isn't that what we're all about growing up? We want to have, as kids, that secret language, that secret club. How many of you had clubs with other people, right? Like, you can be a part of my club. Okay, maybe it was the Babysitter's Club if you're my age group and we're into those types of books, but you might have had a secret club and it was like, okay, only these people can be invited to be a part of it. And these are the secret word to be a part of our club. And I mean, I remember doing this on the playground at Luton Elementary School when I was a little kid, but it also reminds me of the movie Stand By Me, where you have 4 male friends who have a clubhouse literally up in the tree, and one of the friends comes and he doesn't remember the secret knock, and they all know it's him. They're like, Vern, like he can never remember the secret knock, right? So I think that is something that happens when we're little, and the question might be like, why do we do that? Why do we need to have secret clubs and secret language? And I have a couple thoughts about that. I think number one, we all have this humane, like innate feeling of wanting to be included by others. So if you can find your group of people, then that is something that we're looking for. And I think that starts when we're young, and I don't think that ever necessarily stops. And so I think when we're kids and we're developing those relationships and learning how to have relationships, we do that, but maybe sometimes there's a negative end that can come from having a secret club. So I can think of 2 negatives at Loon Elementary School specifically. Number one, I remember playing tag on the field, and apparently this girl I went to school with was like, "Who's it?" And I didn't say anything, and she thought I was being like exclusive, like not including her. And I honestly was running like, I don't want to get tagged, y'all. But that led to some hurt feelings and maybe a misunderstanding. But then additionally, something that I talk about a lot and why I have stickers that say Purple Shirt Day on it is because I didn't get invited to Purple Shirt Day, right? Which maybe is a little bit further than personal idioms and going beyond this idea of creating shared meaning and amongst relational partners. But it was this idea that as a kid I wanted to be included. So I think that's when we start really thinking about having secret clubs. And Purple Shirt Day, of course, as a reminder, was there was a group of people, they invited certain people to wear purple shirts to school on a particular day, and I went home crying because I wasn't invited to wear a purple shirt and I wasn't wearing purple on that day, so I got made fun of. So I think there's this like developing of we want to be included and we want to have groups. But what happens is when we have those groups, it means that we have to exclude others. And personal idioms certainly is a way to help bring people together and bond, but it also separates you from people who are not part of your group, which if you're focused on the in group, okay, but like if you're making fun of the out group, that could be problematic. So we can see that there might be a light and a dark side to personal idioms, but they still, I don't know, there's something about them that's so fun and fascinating and interesting. And I think that we want to use these personal idioms to show that we get each other, that we can remember events. So I went to Greece for a conference that I'm probably still paying off somehow on a credit card or a loan. I think it was expensive. But in graduate school, went to the island of Crete in Greece for an International Association Relationship Research Conference, and went with Tara, who's been on the podcast a lot, and another friend of ours. And there's two main quotes from that trip that come out of things that we were talking about that to this day we can still mention and everyone starts laughing. Number one, we were watching the World Cup, and I love soccer, and it was really cool to be able to watch football in a country that calls it football, where everyone is invested, even though Greece is no longer in the World Cup. It was super cool to be a part of that. So we're watching it, and we're going to this Pizza di Napoli on the island of Crete pretty much every night to watch the World Cup. And one of my favorite players is Zinedine Zidane, who played for France, and he was drinking water, and I just apparently randomly said, "Hydration is hot." And so like ever since then, it was like one of those moments where it was just like I said something stupid in the middle of a game and everyone remembers it. But at the same time, hydration is hot, y'all. You drink your water. Have you had water today? Be sure to drink some water. But then also, I, for some reason, thought I would see a lot of goats in Greece. I don't know what media... where this came from. And so as we're heading back to the airport to leave, we're in a cab where I swear to God we didn't have seatbelts. And I don't know if that's just me exaggerating because so much time has gone by that I'm like, got to make this story like the ultimate scare fest. But I swear to God there weren't seatbelts. The guy was going so fast that I thought this was the end. I was like, this is it. On the road in Crete, this is where it's gonna end. And as we're driving by, I see a goat, and I was like, "Oh, goat, there you are." And I think it was just, again, one of those things like, what is Alysa about on vacations? Apparently saying really random things. But I think it was so funny because we were all very nervous about how fast he was driving. Maybe we didn't know what to do, and it sort of broke up the tension. So it's like, "Oh, goat, there you are." And so the thing about it is I shared it with you and now you understand it. However, that is something that Tara and our other friend, the three of us, shared because it was a moment we shared together. So I definitely think that personal idioms are about remembering, recalling, having nostalgia, going through memories and thinking about good times, fun times, any of those sorts of things, and bring them back to maybe when there aren't fun times, like, I don't know, during COVID-19 or when you are in argument or confrontation. But overall, I do like the idea of personal idioms because it allows people to bond with each other, to tease each other, and so much more. Of course, we have to be careful of both the light and dark. And so Sandra Metz and her colleague talk about we have these cultural idioms like raining cats and dogs, and it's something that generally folks in our society understand that it's raining really hard, but someone from another country might be like, You literally have cats and dogs coming out of the sky? I mean, as long as they're not getting hurt, that does sound amazing, right? Just like you're walking, it starts raining, you like catch a puppy. Like, how amazing would that be? It would brighten anyone's day. But as you can see, it might be difficult to understand these phrases, and personal idioms can be symbols and codes. So they're words, they're gestures, and they talk about it in their chapter. It could be like a line from a movie, right? So do you have a connection with a friend anytime you say a line from a movie? It like you start laughing, or you hear it and then you have to text your friend. That's a personal idiom. It might be nicknames or childhood nicknames, and so of course I want to hear about all your nicknames. It can also be anything that comes from a goofy conversation, misspoken words, or wordplay, as Metz and McCuckey talk about in their chapter. So obviously, hydration is hot and oh goat, there you are, come from goofy conversations and Alysa apparently being ridiculous. So one of the things though is that what happens in a conversation with friends is when you're talking, you're watching movies, you're doing things with each other, and this phrase comes up or this idea comes up, then what happens is it's like someone in the group, it might only be one person, they make note of that, right? They're like, oh my God, oh goat, there you are, that's ridiculous, or some nickname. It makes me think of The Dollop, as y'all know, is my favorite podcast, and you have the host Dave and Gareth, and there's a whole bit about Dave calling Gareth Gary, and then Gareth's mom comes on a lot, and her name's Pam, and there's an episode where she releases like his childhood nickname, Garfy, and Dave's reaction is still one of the funniest things I've ever heard. His laugh during that, and I believe it's during the second part of the opioid, which is obviously a huge public health issue, but also real downer episodes. But if you want to learn more about it, certainly go there and listen. But in the very opening, she does that. So it could be like a running joke now for Dave and Gareth is like Garfy, Gary, and of course now fans are part of it. There's shirts made with those names on it. Me and my best friend wore shirts to one of their shows that said it's Gareth, not Gary, right? So it's one of those things like it makes you part of that podcast community, right? It's any of these things that makes you part of the group. And so that's what friends are trying to do. They typically happen during early stages of relationships as you are developing that relationship culture, that relationship community. And so that's typically when you can see them. And so there are a couple different other things to know about personal idioms. So there are a number of categories, and I always talk about 4 in my interpersonal class. I talk about it's a way to show solidarity, right? Like we're together, right? We talk about sentiment, right? Bringing back up these special moments. They can be private displays of affection. And I think the most classic one that comes from a movie for specifically romantic partners is the movie Ghost, right? He doesn't say, I love you. Demi Moore says, I love you to Patrick Swayze, and he says ditto. And so the personal idiom is ditto, and that becomes very important to that movie. And although that movie came out in the 80s, I won't spoil it for you. You should watch it. And actually, I've been watching a lot of movies. I'm about to hit 300, and I think I'm going to have to add Ghost to that because there's some really good lines in that movie too. Whoopi Goldberg is outstanding. So definitely something to check out. And then the final one I talk about in my classes is really helping sort of leap any conflict barriers. So this idea that if you and your friend or you and your partner are in conflict, a personal idiom, a special nickname, right? That those might be ways to like crack a smile. It might be ways to sort of break up the tension of a situation, and it allows you as friends or as partners to move forward and maybe reframe how you're doing the conflict. And so I think these really small things, it could be one word, it could be one line from a movie, makes all the difference. It can change a conflict. It can brighten someone's day. It can show that, someone just find out they're diagnosed with cancer, for example. There can be a phrase that might just be like, I got you. That something that is their personal idiom that would communicate that to the person who's just been diagnosed. Like, I just think that language and the development of whether they be gestures or other things of that nature can be so powerful, and they're so flexible. It's just so neat that we can create basically any word, any phrase, anything we want to do. As long as someone else understands it and you use it together, then you have a bond, you can communicate. And that is like the most important thing of communication, is that you have some level of shared meaning, but you can do that with the people who mean the most to you. And then you can use those words, that meaning, to showcase how much you love each other, how much the friendship means to you, right? And that this conflict isn't important right now, or we can make it through this conflict. We can make it through anything. And that's what's so cool about these things. Oh my goodness, I love personal idioms so much. Okay. So, in the chapter, Metz talks about there's certainly lots of functions that come from personal idioms, and they talk about how there's 3 broad goals, and so this comes right from the chapter. So the first one is, it allows relationship members to create a culture of shared meaning, which sets them apart from the larger culture. So it is a way to create and manifest intimacy or closeness in your relationships. And one of the things I would say is that it doesn't matter gender or how restrictive society might be about how you can show affection or intimacy in your relationships. I think that personal idioms can be a covert of way of doing it that really does show your special bond. And I think it's unfortunate that there's certain things that have to happen for men to be able to communicate affection in their friendships, like special handshakes and things like that. But those are also personal idioms. And so it is something special between 2 or a few other people. And that's pretty cool. The second broad goal is that it allows relational members to avoid conflict over small problems through teasing expressions and to reaffirm the relationship following conflict. So again, it can break it up. It might make the conflict easier to deal with. And oh gosh, I don't know what it is, but it's from Roseanne. I was just thinking of this right now. Like, Dan and Roseanne on the TV show Roseanne, they're having a conflict, and he's just like, Roseanne's going on and just like kind of getting at him, and then he's just like, "Hey lady," and then she just starts cracking up. And to me, I still remember that, and that show came out in the 80s and carried through the 90s, and now we have the Connors. But I think that something like that, although that might have been the first time he used it, it could be used again and again to sort of break up a tension of a conflict and make it easier for people to deal with it. And then finally, the third broad goal is helping partners negotiate potentially awkward situations. So one of the things that I think of perhaps is like romantic partners and maybe sexual experiences. And from the line that I talked about at the beginning, making mashed potatoes or instant mashed potatoes is a euphemism for sex. And so maybe that is something that helps people kind of joke and find humor and be able to kind of talk about these things that make us feel so uncomfortable, and things that we should feel comfortable maybe talking about with our partners doesn't make it any less awkward. So maybe personal idioms can help us do that. Or what about when you have to go somewhere and with friends or a partner or family members, and you want to find a way to get out, right? Like on Sex and the City, Miranda always is like, "I have to go feed my cat." And that was her way to be like, "I have to leave." And so partners might have different things that they indicate to each other, or friends might be like, "How do we leave this party?" Or "How do I let you know that I feel uncomfortable with this person right now?" It might be pulling an earring. So my friends and I, when we used to go to the bars and there was someone behind us that maybe made us uncomfortable, or someone thought we might be concerned, they say, "Watch your 6." But then we learned real fast that a lot of people know military time, so that's not going to work. So we would flash the number 6. And so that would be a way to be like, behind me, I'm uncomfortable, something like that. And so I think there's lots of ways that it can help us out of potentially problematic or awkward conversations or just uncomfortable situations. That is something that's just between me and someone else that can help. And again, I just get so excited. And I had to tell you, if you're like, Alysa, you're geeking out over really small things, and I'll be like, yeah, I am, because small things make the biggest differences. And according to the research on this area from the chapter on Metz and McCuckey, those who use personal idioms in their relationships are more satisfied than those who do not. So it might be something like, you might not want to force it, but you might think about in the next conversation, is there something silly that someone says, or do you remember something that you enjoyed, a movie or a TV show or an event or an experience that you can bring up and sort of bring it back? Maybe it's even now, personal idioms often fall with verbal and nonverbal, but we also have to think of how we might do this online. And perhaps the way we do it online is through GIFs and memes and other things of that nature. And they might mean certain things to certain people. You could put up, one of my favorite GIFs right now is of the actor Jake Gyllenhaal just shaking his head like, nah, like NAH, no. And so I could share that, but maybe there's a personal connection with one or two other people who know what that means. Or Gina Linetti from Brooklyn Nine-Nine, she has one where she sticks her tongue out like and rolls her eyes at the same time, and maybe someone will see me post that and know why I posted it, right? Those could also be personal idioms. So we might have to think that this is even widening as technology expands and we find other ways in which we can connect over text and social medias. But here's the thing. Okay, so how do you get into it? So Hopper, Knapp, and Scott, as outlined in this chapter, there are 8 categories of personal idioms. The first one is expressions of affection, and this can be any terms of endearment or other words that would indicate how you feel about someone. Again, in Ghost, it was ditto. Some people say, I love you, but remember, personal idioms, it's shared meaning just between those people. So thinking about, are there things that you say to each other that, it just means something specific to the two of you? That would be an expression of affection. It could be partner nicknames. I remember being friends with this guy, Jason, and our nicknames were, he would be like, woman, and I'd be like, whatever, poo-poo head. And so we tried to enter a Valentine's Day contest for best partner nicknames, even though we weren't dating, and we did not win. But those were always just kind of funny friend nicknames that we had for each other. How many of you have names for other people? Like maybe someone you're just like, oh, this person I work with. Maybe you're like, Mrs. Talks a lot, or you have like nicknames like, how do you talk about the workplace with your friends, or how do you talk about classmates? Mr. I dominate conversations. And those might be pretty straightforward, but I'm sure you all have nicknames for that. Love to hear them. Requests and routines is another category. So you can have certain codes or symbols that would indicate that you're looking for something to happen. And so this is a personal idiom. Can I have them with myself? Because I saw the movie My Girl when I was a kid. And again, I don't want to spoil, even though I know it's really old, but there's a scene where the main character's like about her best guy friend. He can't see without his glasses. And so in the morning when I can't find my glasses, I'm always like, but I can't see without my glasses. And so that's sort of like a request. And if someone else knew that, or I lived with someone else, or my partner or my friend might be like, Alysa can't find her glasses, this is a request. It could also highlight some routines. Okay. We certainly have teasing insults. It could be like, oh, Alysa, you know what? Hydration is hot. And it could be used to make fun of me, and that's fine. We've talked about how we can use them in confrontations to break it up. And then the other two might not be as relevant, but could still be relevant in friendship relationships or friends with benefits, are sexual invitations like making instant mashed potatoes, or sexual references and euphemisms. So naming each other's body parts and things like that. One thing that's important to know about these categories is that, again, people are generally satisfied by having them. But the teasing, insults, and confrontations, there's a thin line between bonding and having fun and them being ambiguous or passive and aggressive. So if something is like truly serious and someone is not having a good day or they ask you to stop, then the teasing should stop, or consider listening in the conflict instead of like forcing a personal idiom just to make things okay in that moment and not actually solve the conflict. So I think that's pretty important to consider. So, oh gosh, I love these so much. There's also research from Bell and Healy that would talk about having jokes about activities, affection, confrontation, nicknames for self, and objects that specifically go with friendship. And so here's the thing, friends. I think this is a really neat way to build relationships, as long as we're careful about the exclusion or being passive aggressive or being inconsiderate to our partners and our friends. That this is super cool. And I think that this might all be something that we have an example of. So this is what I want to do. I want to celebrate friendships. I want to celebrate your friendships. And I would love if you sent me a personal idiom of some sort, a nickname, a saying with just a brief description. You don't have to give us everything because I know it's yours. And if you send in a picture, I'm going to be posting these celebrations on Instagram, and those who send them to me and are posted on Instagram over the next, I'll say through the end of the year, because I think it's really important to celebrate, especially now, that you will all be pulled randomly to win swag, stickers, other prizes, and super fun stuff for you and your friends. So if you would like to enter, check out the link to Google Forms where you can talk about it, and that'll be in show notes. And then also you can email them to me at bestforeverspod@gmail.com with photos and all sorts of good details. And you can find me on all the socials at Best Forevers Pod, where you can share those things with me. So until next time, friends, be sure to check out your little bunny foo-foos and check out the goats and drink your water because without personal idioms and our friends, who would we be? Thanks for listening to Best Forevers. If you like what you hear, be sure to subscribe, rate, review, and of course, share with a friend. Please be sure to follow Best Forevers on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Best Forevers Pod, and I'm at Dr. Alysa Lucas on Twitter. You can always find the podcast webpage for more information at bestforeverspod.com, and share your stories of friendship by emailing me at bestforeverspod@gmail.com. And if you'd like to support the movement to love on our friends more, check out the podcast on patreon.com/bestforeverspod. Now, friends, check out this recommended podcast that you must get in your ear holes immediately.
Do you love true crime, history, and mysterious happenings? Every week on The Cult of Domesticity, a guest and I discuss a different historical happening, a true crime story, or whatever strikes our fancy. Join me, Courtney, every Thursday to hear some fascinating tales from some fascinating people, wherever you listen to podcasts.